All right. So again, the purpose of the call is to share with you the new and improved Scalar Heart Connection session with some very exciting new information about what I'm calling the Quantum Healing Codes archetypal patterns. And so what I want to do is to just remind you, since it's been a while for some of you that have taken the workshop, that the 6 codes that make up the quantum healing codes, if you'll recall, we found that within the harmonics, we could connect them just like triangles, that if we treated these frequencies as sound frequencies, but also as a wave frequency, that a wave has a length, a wavelength. And if we connected the wavelengths, we found that the hypotenuse was exactly another harmonic of another code. And so when we put that triangle together, we find that it looks like what's on your screen right now. And we also discovered that we could put exactly 12 of these around a circle. And so you'll see that the first angle there, the first line, is the code 396, and this other one that forms the triangle, this right triangle, is 639, and the hypotenuse is the harmonic of 417. And so I'll just go ahead and put 12 of these around, and we see that they fit exactly. And the geometry that this is creating is the geometry that a lot of people will recognize as the Star of David. It's the twin tetrahedron. It also is the foundation of the flower of life, and I like to refer to it as Metatron's cube. And we also discovered that within this geometry we could fit just perfectly a golden triangle. And what's unique about the golden triangle is not only that the length, this length is to this length as this one is to the whole. So that's basically the definition of the golden triangle. And in the middle, we find that these angles are both 72, and we'll remember from the workshop that 72 is the average number of heartbeats per hour by the human heart. And we also have this idea that we have an upward-facing triangle and a downward-facing triangle, and we'll talk about that in a minute, because this also can represent the Hopi idea of the person with 2 hearts, and we'll talk about that. The Sufis have a similar concept about the 2 hearts and how we can unite these 2 hearts into one singular heart. And we found that same geometry is the exact hexagon that is found in the ancient traditions of the chakra symbols. So that Star of David, that twin tetrahedron, is also the symbol for the heart chakra. And the symbol for the heart chakra is also green. And we found in the workshop that the code 528 is right in the middle. If we take 528 and treat it as terahertz, or in trillions of cycles per second, it's the color green. And likewise, the other quantum healing codes also line up with the different colors. And those different colors are associated with the different chakras. And so what we're getting is the idea that the geometry of the heart contains all of the frequencies of all the other organs in the body. And we'll be treating the organs as having each one having its own unique frequency vibration. And within that vibration, within that organ, we have different emotions associated with it. So in the process of Scalar Heart Connection, we're looking for, we have an issue, say it's an emotional upset, or we have something isn't working the way we would like it to in terms of relationship or our career, finances, that oftentimes there's an emotion associated with that is activated, and that emotion is often unique to a particular organ. And so this is giving us an idea that the codes are related to the different organ centers, the various emotions. Now, what I had done is, in looking at the codes, I had not seen this before. It seems kind of silly now that I think about it, but after looking at this for 8 or 10 years, it finally just occurred to me one day that if I start with 3, as in 3, 9, 6, but if I just count down the column here, I find that after 3 is 4, and then we have 5 and 6 and 7, 8, and then we start at 9 again, and after 9 is really, we start all over again with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we start all over again with 1 and 2. And so you should recognize that these are the quantum healing codes and that they're sequential, just as I just showed. And so I started to wonder, what does that mean? And we recall, for those that have taken the Hero workshop, that we found that these different numbers can represent different aspects of the houses within the zodiac, and that we were finding different patterns that represented the issue that we were having, the obstacle that was in our way, that was causing us from not getting what we want, and then the action that we needed. So we're getting a clue that we're having the same thing within the codes of the quantum healing codes. And so for those that haven't taken the Hero workshop, I just want to introduce what we're talking about. And if you look at the number 1, imagine that is the first house in the zodiac, that we have. The zodiac is divided into 12 months. And so let's say this is the first month, and we'll just go around, make sure we have 12. And now within the zodiac, the first house is the house related to the astrological sign of Aries. And then we have Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Now, if we add to that the quantum healing codes, and I just started, I said, well, the first one, 396, starts with a 3, so let's throw it against the third house, see what we get. 4 lines up with Cancer, 5 with Leo, the 639 one with Virgo, 7 is Libra, and 8 is Scorpio. And you might recognize that 3 is the root chakra in our diagram, and I wondered, why doesn't the people, these ancient civilization with this ancient knowledge, which is where I think this came from, why did they start with 3 in Gemini and not address Aries and Taurus? And so when we took the Hero workshop, we realized that we could put these 12 stages in the stages of the hero's journey. And the first 2 stages of the hero's journey is essentially the hero is at home in the first house of Aries. And in the second house, he gets the call to adventure, or she, but normally they haven't really accepted the call, and nor have they even refused the call. So really there isn't anything happening in the first 2 houses. But as soon as we get the third house, which is Gemini, which is about our mind and our thinking, that is where everything starts to happen. That's where we refuse the call, and when we refuse the call, the whole universe sort of conspires against us to get us on our journey. And then it's not coincidental that 4 is the 4th house. So, and the 5th is the 5th house. And 4, as we know, is the pelvis, which is where we hold our emotions, and Cancer is also the house of holding our emotions. So suddenly these quantum healing codes start to line up with our hero's journey, and they start to line up with the houses of the zodiac. So then I thought, going back to the hero's journey where we had these different triangles, and if you haven't taken the hero's journey, what I'll try to explain is that if we start with 3 and we create a triangle that connects the 3, the 9, and the 6, we find that we get a 90-degree angle right here at the 6. And in astrology, that would be a square. And so when you have a squared planetary aspect, essentially that's your obstacle. And these other 2 angles are both 45-degree angles, and essentially those are referred to as semi-squares. And so this triangle that we have is really showing us our challenges and our obstacles, the things that the hero needs to do to overcome whatever is preventing him from or her from realizing whatever their ultimate intention is. And so we can do the same thing for 417. So we have the 4, we have the 1, and the 7, and we're creating this perfect 45-degree triangle. 528, we have the same 90-degree triangle, the two 45-degree triangles, and we can do that all the way around up to 852. And so if we take 396, our first example, and we say that the 3, the first one, is our issue, and the 9 is one of the obstacles, and if we treat 6 as the action that the hero needs to take, we start to see that whatever issue we're having in our session, we're already getting a clue as to what the issue is telling us in terms of what we can expect about the obstacle and the action. And so I looked at that and I said, well, let's see what this is really telling us, because 396 is, we can summarize that and say, well, it's Gemini, which is about the mind, but it's really the mind that is judging. In Gemini, we're discovering duality, where we start to be thinking about right or wrong, black or white, good or bad. And so it's the intellect that is judging. And then in Cancer, our emotions come in, but the emotions are really from childhood memories. This is the house of childhood. It's also the house of mother, and how these early childhood memories, how they affect us as we get older in life, and they start to play a really huge role in our mind and how we view our situations from sort of a conditioned response. And so our effort is really to try and get into the heart, but this heart is still, it's the heart of self-expression. It's the first step in individuation. It's about creativity. But look what happens when we go up to Virgo, because Virgo has now taken on the sense of the heart. And when you combine the heart with the mind, our thinking, intellect, judging mind, suddenly our mind becomes compassionate, our mind becomes discerning. And that's a different mind than this lower mind. So we have a sense of a lower mind and a higher mind. We have a sense of a lower heart, and now we have a higher heart, which is Libra. And I always like to think of Libra as the house that has the Egyptian scale, where it's the sort of the judge. You have the two scales of justice, but in Egyptian terminology, I love the scale that holds the heart on one side and the feather on the other. So we're weighing our heart to see that, do we have the compassion in our relationships? Do we have that sense of unconditional love, so that there's nothing weighing our heart down? So this is truly, from that standpoint, a higher heart. And then the emotions, we have these lower emotions from childhood and how we respond to events in our lives. But these emotions that now have the heart of compassion and the mind of discernment, suddenly this is more like a higher emotions. These are the emotions that bring us into that deep subconscious element where we find that the hero transforms. And so this gives us a sense, again, of the higher mind, the higher heart, the higher emotions, and also the lower mind, the lower heart, and the lower emotions. And if we put the numbers to it, like we just talked about, again, we find the lower mind, the lower emotions, the lower heart. We have the higher mind, the higher heart, and the higher emotions. And so I would say that when we are confronted with an issue, and in the context of doing a Scalar Heart session around that issue, what we're really striving to do is to bring these two hearts together. And as we bring them together back into this Star of David, this twin tetrahedron, we find that the colors all come together, and that's where we have that sense of that white light of wholeness. And it's the same sense of the person with one heart that the Hopi Indians talk about, and the Sufis and other traditions. And so coming back to our in the manual I had this laid out, and I realized that I hadn't done it properly. That actually this sense of the green is the heart. That should actually be represented in both sides of the triangle. It's the intermediary. It's the mediator between these two seemingly opposing tetrahedrons. And so if we just go around, we find that in the higher triangle, or the higher tetrahedron, we have the crown, we have the brow, we have the throat chakra. Again, the heart is the intermediary. But on the lower triangle, we still have the heart, and we have the solar plexus, we have the pelvis, and we have the root chakra. So there's been a bit of a change in how we configure this and how we look at that. And so the great news is that now when you go into the practitioner login to sign up and to use the online version of the session, you will use your ID just as you did before. If you don't have one, you can simply scroll down and log in, or request a login ID. And you'll find that if you've taken the Basic for Every Heart workshop, there are now new forms. You can click on this and you'll get the new process with this information in it. You'll get a new reference sheet, a new session worksheet, and also you'll get a list of these quantum healing code archetypal patterns. And if you've taken the Hero workshop, you'll also be able to access and download the new process, the new reference sheet, the session sheet. The chakra and the season qualities don't change, but now you're familiar with the hero patterns. We had 12 hero patterns, and now I'm calling these the sub-archetypal hero patterns because we have the quantum healing code patterns at the beginning, and then we will have the sub-archetypal hero patterns at the end. So let me go down and show you. Here's where you would log on, and you'll start the session just as you did before. But when you get to the very first chakra, when the person is you're asking them to choose a number 1 through 7, the heart will tell you what chakra the emotion is being held that is in relationship to the issue, the reason they want to have the session. And so we'll know in this example that the person got the root chakra, and the root chakra is 396. It's the archetypal pattern of the quantum healing code number 396. And so essentially what that's telling us is that before we actually find out what the obstacles and the action is, that we already have a sense that their session is going to have a lot to do with the lower mind, the higher action of the house of Libra. That's Sagittarius, I'm sorry. And then the higher mind, which is number 6. So the pattern here is that the Earth chakra, which is, by the way, 3,960 miles is the radius, and 396 is the code for that. So it's telling us that Earth is the theater of evolution, which is leading our lower mind, which is preoccupied with our fears, our sense of duality, and our cultural conditioning, is being led to search for higher meaning and purpose. So the hero is called to take action to grow beyond their individual identity to a place of non-judgmental and higher mind qualities of positive action and service to others. And so you get, in the same sheet, you get a little bit more detail. And what this is, you can read this to the client. I might just read the summary to the client. But then here, as we go through the session, you're suddenly getting this. You're getting some guidance as to what the issue might really be about on a deeper subconscious level, a more archetypal pattern about what the obstacle is that's coming up for them, and then the action. And so you'll continue the session just as you've been taught in the workshop until you get all the way down to the after the stellar memory, the triggers. You'll find that in letter G, we've changed this so you go right into the sub-archetypal patterns, which are the same patterns that you had before, except there's no longer 12 patterns. there's now 24, and I want to explain to you why there's 24. You're familiar, again, if you've taken the Hero Workshop, that this triangle is the foundation for these archetypal patterns that we were calling the hero journey. And what I had thought was that if this is the issue, this 90-degree angle I was treating as the obstacle and this 60-degree angle as the action. Because I thought that the obstacle would always come before the action. But it turns out that it could just very well be that the pattern, instead of being a 157, could simply be a 197. That there is really, when I looked at it and I tested this out on many sessions, I found that half the people were picking 197 and the other half were picking 157. So I decided that I would add the other 12 to the session, so now we would have a total of 24. And when you take the 6 quantum healing code patterns and you add to them the 24 sub-archetypal hero patterns, we find that we have a total of 144 possibilities. And that 144 is a very interesting number because, for one thing, it's known as a very magical, special number, but at the same time, it represents the 144 different doshas or personality patterns that you find in Vedic astrology. And so you will come back to this and you will have the person pick a number 1 through 24 and select here when ready. And then you will get the archetypal pattern just as you had done before. And then use the sub-archetypal pattern to fine-tune the issue and the obstacle and the action that came up earlier, so the client can now put together their story in a more clear perspective, and just realizing that you've already had the benefit of the quantum healing code pattern in the beginning, and now we're going to fine-tune it with this one. And again, you have all the information is presented below, but now when the person enters their story, what we have found that when we've been beta testing this for the last 2 months is that we're getting a much deeper insight into what the person's real issue is. Because sometimes, the person isn't really aware of what's really going on in sort of a more subconscious level. And so these patterns are really helping us fine-tune the story and leading to a much more powerful and deeper positive statement. And so I have this back here as I think probably my last slide, is to remind you that you're not confined to doing this session online. If you still like to do it sort of more hands-on using the manual, that you can download the new process and all these sheets so that you can just plug this right into the way that we've been doing it before. And so I'd like to open this up to questions. I know that was a whole lot of information, but I find that if you're familiar with the online session and you just go through it, it is really very self-explanatory. Dan has done an excellent job in doing the program behind this so that it really flows, and Laura has helped us put this together and helped us with the beta testing. So I find that it's very fluid and it just makes sort of common sense as you go through it.